Brother Marcus Kane woke before dawn as he had done every day for 15 years. The floating monastery of silent stars drifted slowly through the purple clouds of Kepler 442b, far from the noise and chaos of the galaxy. He rolled off his simple sleeping mat and walked to the window. Below him stretched endless purple mists that hid the planet's surface. Above him, the stars still shone in the dark sky. Marcus had come to this place as a young man, angry at the world and searching for answers. The human colony on Kepler 442b was small and poor. Most people worked in the mines or grew food in the underground farms. The Zephyrian Empire that ruled most of the galaxy considered humans to be useful but not important. They let humans live. On worlds like this one, as long as they paid their taxes and caused no trouble, the monastery was different. Here, Brother Gregory and the other monks taught something the Empire did not like. They taught that the mind could be stronger than any weapon. They taught that thoughts and will could change reality itself. The Empire called this dangerous nonsense, but Marcus had seen it work. He had learned to move small objects with his mind. He had learned to sense the thoughts of others. Most importantly, he had learned to find peace within himself. Marcus put on his simple brown robes and walked to the meditation hall. The other monks were already there, sitting in perfect silence. There were only 12 of them left now. Once there had been hundreds of monasteries like this one across human space. The Empire had closed most of them down. They said the teachings were primitive superstition that held humanity back from progress. That Father Gregory sat at the front of the hall. He was old now, his hair white and his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. Marcus had learned everything from this man: how to quiet his mind, how to feel the flow of energy that connected all living things, how to stand firm against any force that tried to break him. The morning meditation lasted 2 hours. Marcus felt his mind become still and clear like a mountain lake. He could sense the thoughts of his brothers around him. He could feel the life, energy of the plants in the garden. He could even touch the vast network of consciousness that connected every human in the galaxy. This was what the Empire feared. Not weapons or armies, but the power of unified human thought. After meditation came breakfast. Simple food eaten in silence, then work in the gardens or the library. The monastery grew its own food and kept ancient books that told the true history of humanity. These books spoke of a time before the Empire, when humans had explored the stars freely. They told of great discoveries and brave adventures. The Empire's history books never mentioned these things. Marcus was working in the garden when the ships came. At first, they were just dark spots against the morning sky. Then they grew larger and louder. Imperial warships painted blood red with the golden symbol of the Zephyrian Empire on their sides. Marcus counted 6 of them. Far too many for a peaceful visit. The ships landed in the valley below the monastery. Soldiers poured out wearing black armor and carrying energy weapons. Their leader was tall and thin with pale blue skin. Marcus recognized him from the Empire's news broadcasts. Inquisitor Vextar, one of the Empire's most feared agents. He specialized in hunting down rebels and destroying forbidden knowledge. Father Gregory called all the monks together in the main hall. His voice was calm, but Marcus could see worry in his old teacher's eyes. The soldiers would be here soon. They would demand to search the monastery. They would want to see the books and the meditation rooms. They would ask questions about the teachings. The sound of marching feet echoed through the corridors. Heavy boots on stone floors. A main door burst open and soldiers rushed in. Inquisitor Vextar walked behind them slowly and calmly. His cold eyes studied each monk in turn. When he looked at Marcus, the young monk felt a chill run down his spine. Vextar spoke in the common galactic language. His voice was soft but filled with menace. He said the Empire had received reports about illegal activities at the monastery. He said they were teaching forbidden knowledge that threatened the peace and order of civilized space. He demanded that Father Gregory surrender all books and teaching materials immediately. Father Gregory stepped forward. His back was straight. Despite his age, he looked directly into the Inquisitor's eyes without fear. He said the monastery taught only peace and understanding. He said they harmed no one and threatened nothing. He said the Empire had no right to destroy knowledge that belonged to all humanity. Vextar smiled coldly. He said the Empire decided what knowledge was safe and what was dangerous. He said humans were too primitive to understand such things properly. He said Father Gregory could choose to cooperate or face the consequences. The old monk's answer was simple and clear. No. The energy blast from Vextar's weapon hit Father Gregory in the chest. The wise old man fell to the stone floor and did not move again. The other monks cried out in shock and horror. Some tried to run to their teacher's side, but the soldiers pointed their weapons at them. Marcus stood perfectly still. He felt something change inside him in that moment. Not anger, though anger was there too. Something deeper and more powerful. An understanding that went beyond words or thoughts. The Empire had just made the greatest mistake in its long history. They had killed not just a man, but an idea. And ideas, Marcus knew, were much harder to kill than people. Vextar ordered the soldiers to arrest all the surviving monks. As the energy shackles locked around his wrists, Marcus looked once more at his teacher's body. He made a silent promise. To the dead man and to himself, this would not end here. The Empire would learn that some things could not be conquered by force. Some things could not be broken. They would learn the true power of humanity. The prison transport ship flew through space for 7 days before reaching Zarian Prime. Marcus sat in chains with the other surviving monks from the monastery. The Imperial soldiers had given them water and basic food, but nothing else. Ship was cold and dark. Most of the monks prayed silently or wept for Father Gregory. Marcus did neither. He spent the time thinking and planning. The other monks thought he had given up. They had seen him surrender without fighting when the soldiers came for them. They had watched him walk calmly onto the transport ship as if he were going on a simple journey. Some whispered that Marcus had lost his courage. Others said the shock of seeing their teacher killed had broken his mind. None of them understood what was really happening. Marcus had studied the Empire for 15 years. He knew their strengths and their weaknesses. Their greatest strength was their overwhelming military power. No single world or species could stand against their fleets. But their greatest weakness was their absolute belief in control. They thought that if they could control people's bodies and actions, they could control their minds and spirits too. This was where they were wrong. Zarian Prime was a dead world covered in gray stone and metal buildings. The only purpose of this planet was to hold prisoners. Millions of beings from across the galaxy lived here in labor camps. They mined radioactive crystals from deep underground. The work was dangerous, and many died, but the Empire always brought more prisoners to replace them. The monks were separated when they arrived at the prison. Marcus never saw most of them again. He was assigned to Mining Complex 7 along with 300 other prisoners. Most were humans from various colonies. Some were alien species who had refused to follow imperial law. All of them had the same look in their eyes. The look of beings who had given up hope. Marcus was given a cell, barely large enough for one person to lie down. His cellmate was an older human named Jake Miller, who had been imprisoned for 5 years. Jake had been a teacher on a colony world before he was arrested for teaching unauthorized history lessons. Now he spent his days breaking rocks in the dark tunnels below the prison. On Marcus's first night in the cell, Jake tried to give him advice about how to survive. He said the most important thing was to keep your head down and follow orders. He said the guards would kill anyone who caused trouble. He said the only way to stay alive was to become invisible and hope they eventually let you go. Marcus listened, politely, but said nothing. Jake was a good man who meant well, but he had let the prison break his spirit. He had accepted that this was his life now. This was exactly what the Empire wanted from its prisoners. Complete surrender. The work in. The mines was brutal. Prisoners used simple tools to dig radioactive crystals from tunnel walls. The crystals glowed with sickly green light and made many workers sick over time. The guards were members of a species called the Corthex. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and hard shell-like skin. They carried energy weapons and were quick to use them on anyone who moved too slowly. Marcus worked steadily, but said little during his first weeks in the prison. He watched and listened. He learned the routines of the guards. He studied the layout of the tunnels. Most importantly, he observed the other prisoners. He could see the fear and despair in their faces. He could sense their broken spirits through the connection all humans shared. After a month, Marcus began to speak quietly with other prisoners during rest periods. He started with simple conversations about their lives before prison. He asked about their families and their homes. He listened to their stories with real interest and compassion. Slowly, some of the prisoners began to remember who they had been before this place tried to erase their identities. Marcus told them about the monastery and the teachings of Father Gregory. He explained that the mind could not be imprisoned even when the body was trapped. He taught them simple meditation techniques that could be done even while working in the mines. He showed them how to find strength within themselves that no guard could take away. The practice spread quietly through the prison complex. Prisoners began teaching other prisoners. They learned to maintain inner calm, even during the worst abuse from guards. They discovered they could support each other through the mental connection that linked all conscious beings. Most importantly, they realized they were not broken slaves, but human beings with dignity and worth. The change was subtle at first. Prisoners stood a little straighter. They looked guards in the eye instead of staring at the ground. They helped each other more. Often, the guards noticed something was different, but could not identify exactly what had changed. The prisoners were still following orders and doing their work, but something in their attitude had shifted. Guard Captain Thorak was the first to realize that Marcus was the source of the change. Thorak was older and more experienced than the other guards. He had seen many human prisoners over the years. He knew that humans were naturally rebellious and had to be broken quickly before they could cause problems. But this human seemed to be making other prisoners stronger instead of weaker. Thorak decided to make an example of Marcus. He had the monk dragged to the punishment cells deep below the main prison. These cells were designed to break the spirits of the most difficult prisoners. They were completely dark and barely large enough for a person to sit. Prisoners were given minimal food and water. Most begged to be released after a few days. Marcus spent 30 days in the punishment cell. Guards expected him to emerge broken and submissive like other prisoners who had endured this treatment. Instead, he walked out calmly and returned to work as if nothing had happened. Other prisoners saw this and understood that the teachings were real. If Marcus could survive the worst the prison had to offer without breaking, then they could survive too. Word of the unbreakable human began to spread beyond Mining Complex 7. Other prison facilities across Zirian Prime heard stories about a monk who could not be broken. Guards from different complexes came to see him for themselves. They tried new punishments and tortures, but nothing worked. Marcus endured everything with perfect calm. The stories spread further. Prison ships carried tales of the unbreakable human to other worlds. Released prisoners told their families and friends about the monk who had taught them that freedom existed in the mind, even when the body was trapped. The philosophy of unbreaking began to take root across the galaxy. Captain Lisa Morgan of the resistance group Free Terra heard these stories on 3 different worlds. She had been fighting the Empire for 10 years using traditional methods: sabotage, raids, guerrilla warfare. The resistance had won some small victories, but never achieved anything that truly threatened Imperial power. This human monk might be something different, something the Empire could not fight with weapons and ships. Lisa began planning a rescue operation. She gathered intelligence about Zerion Prime and Mining Complex 7. She recruited agents and prepared equipment. But when her team finally reached Marcus and offered to break him out of prison, he surprised them with his answer. Not yet, he told them quietly. The seeds must first take root. Marcus knew that his real work was just beginning. The Empire had made him into exactly what they feared most: a symbol that could not be destroyed, an idea that grew stronger with every attempt to crush it. Soon it would be time to show them the true power of unbreaking human will. 2 years passed before the first prisoner was released from Zerion Prime. His name was Paul Carter, and he had served his sentence for the crime of refusing to pay Imperial taxes on his small farm. When Paul returned to his home world of New Dakota, he carried with him something more valuable than any treasure. He carried the teachings of the way of unbreaking. Paul had been broken when he first arrived at the prison. The loss of his farm and the shame of imprisonment had crushed his spirit. But Marcus had shown him how to find strength in the darkest places. Paul had learned to meditate while breaking rocks in the tunnels. He had discovered that his mind could remain free even when his body was chained. Now he was going home with knowledge that could change everything. The first thing Paul did was visit his neighbor, Helen Cross. Helen was a widow who struggled to keep her small farm running after her husband died. The Imperial tax collectors had been threatening to take her land, too. Paul found her crying in her kitchen, holding an eviction notice in her shaking hands. Paul sat with Helen and taught her what Marcus had taught him. He showed her how to find calm in the center of her fear. He explained that the Empire could take her land, but they could not take her dignity or her strength. Helen listened and slowly began to understand. By the end of that evening, she was no longer crying. Instead, she was planning how to help other farmers who faced the same problems. Word spread through the farming communities of New Dakota. People came to hear Paul speak about the philosophy he had learned in prison. He told them about the human monk who could not be broken. He taught them simple meditation techniques and explained how mental strength could overcome any external pressure. Soon dozens of farmers were practicing the way of unbreaking, the same pattern repeated on dozens of worlds as more prisoners were released. Each former prisoner became a teacher. They shared what they had learned with family and friends. They showed others how to resist the Empire without violence or weapons. The philosophy spread like seeds carried on the wind. On the industrial world of Forge Station, a released prisoner named Betty Ford taught factory workers how to find inner peace despite their harsh working conditions. The workers discovered they could maintain their humanity even in the most dehumanizing circumstances. Production quotas remained the same, but the workers no longer felt like slaves. On the mining world of Titan's Edge, former prisoner Carl Davis shared the teachings with fellow miners. The miners learned to support each other through the mental connections that linked all human consciousness. When one miner was injured or sick, the others would focus their collective will on helping him heal faster. Imperial doctors could not explain why miners from this facility recovered from injuries so quickly. The movement was not limited to humans. Other species had also learned from Marcus during their time in Imperial prisons. A Zilarian trader named Kix took the teachings back to his merchant clan. The Zilarians had always been practical people focused on profit. But the way of unbreaking showed them that true wealth came from inner strength rather than external possessions. Soon, Zilarian trade routes became secret networks for spreading the philosophy across the galaxy. Admiral Zethka was the first Imperial leader to recognize the true threat. Zethka commanded the Empire's Third Fleet and was responsible for maintaining order in the outer territories. His intelligence reports showed a pattern that disturbed him greatly. Crime rates were falling on worlds where the philosophy had spread. Tax collections remained stable. There were no riots or armed rebellions. Yet something fundamental was changing. The Admiral studied reports from his agents across dozens of worlds. People were no longer responding to Imperial authority with fear and submission. They followed orders and paid taxes, but they did so with a quiet dignity that unnerved Imperial officials. It was as if an entire population had decided that the Empire could control their actions, but not their souls. Zethka realized this was more dangerous than any armed rebellion. Weapons could destroy rebels, but how do you fight an idea? How do you conquer people who refuse to be conquered in their hearts and minds? The Admiral decided that the source of this infection had to be eliminated. He ordered Marcus transferred to the Imperial capital for public execution. The transfer order reached Zarian Prime during the third year of Marcus's imprisonment. By this time, the monk had become a legend among the prisoners. New arrivals sought him out to learn the way of unbreaking. Even some guards had begun to respect him, though they would never admit it openly. The prison complex had become a university of human resistance, disguised as a place of punishment. Captain Lisa Morgan received word of the transfer through her network of resistance contacts. She knew this was her last chance to rescue Marcus. Before he was taken to the heavily defended Imperial capital, Lisa had spent 3 years building her organization and gathering resources. Free Terra now had agents on 50 worlds and access to captured Imperial equipment. The rescue mission was planned with military precision. Lisa's team included former Imperial soldiers who had defected to the Resistance. They used stolen Imperial uniforms and forged transfer orders to infiltrate Zarian Prime. The plan was to extract Marcus during the confusion of a prisoner transport and escape before anyone realized what had happened. The rescue team reached Marcus in his cell the night before his scheduled transfer. He was meditating when they arrived, sitting in perfect stillness despite the chaos of preparation around him. Lisa expected him to be grateful for the rescue. Instead, he calmly explained that he had a different plan. Marcus told Lisa about the hidden research station where Father Gregory had concealed the monastery's most important secrets. The location was encoded in meditation techniques that only Marcus fully understood. At this station were records of humanity's greatest discoveries from before the Empire's rise to power. Knowledge that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Lisa's team had come to rescue one man. Instead, they found themselves embarking on a mission that could reshape the future of human civilization. Marcus finally agreed to leave the prison, but not to hide in some safe location. He wanted to be taken to the abandoned station in the Void Nebula dot as their stolen Imperial transport lifted off from Zarian Prime. Marcus looked back at the prison complex one last time. He had entered that place as a monk seeking to preserve ancient knowledge. He was leaving as something far more dangerous to the Empire. He was leaving as a symbol that could not be destroyed and an idea that could not be contained. Behind him in the prison, the other inmates watched the transport disappear into the star-filled sky. They did not know if they would ever see their teacher again, but they carried his teachings in their hearts and minds. The way of unbreaking would continue to spread even without its founder. Admiral Zethka received the report of Marcus's escape while reviewing battle plans for his fleet. The Admiral was not surprised. He had expected the resistance to attempt a rescue. What concerned him more was the intelligence indicating that the escaped monk was heading toward the Void Nebula. Imperial scouts had detected strange energy readings from that region for decades, but had never investigated. Thoroughly, the Admiral realized that the human monk might be seeking something more than mere refuge. There might be secrets hidden in that nebula that could threaten the very foundations of Imperial power. Zefka ordered his fastest ships to pursue the transport and prevent Marcus from reaching whatever destination he sought. The race to the Void Nebula had begun. The Void Nebula stretched across 100 light-years of empty space between the galaxy's spiral arms. Most travelers avoided this region because navigation was nearly impossible among the swirling clouds of dark matter and electromagnetic storms. Imperial maps marked it as unexplored territory, with warnings about spatial anomalies and equipment failures. This was exactly why Father Gregory had chosen it as a hiding place for humanity's greatest secrets. Captain Lisa Morgan's stolen transport. Ships struggled through the nebula's outer edges. The vessel's instruments went crazy as they encountered waves of exotic radiation. Stars disappeared and reappeared behind shifting walls of purple and black gas. Lisa had to rely on Marcus's guidance to find their destination. The monk sat in deep meditation, using senses beyond normal human perception to navigate through the chaos. After 3 days of careful flying, they found what they were looking for. The colony ship New Horizon hung motionless in a pocket of clear space, surrounded by nebulous storms. The massive vessel was over 2 kilometers long and had been drifting here for 70 years. Its hull was dark and scarred but intact. Most importantly, it was completely hidden from Imperial detection. Lisa's team docked with the colony ship and activated its emergency power systems. Lights flickered on throughout the vessel's corridors for the first time in decades. The air recycling systems hummed to life, clearing away the stale atmosphere. Marcus led them through familiar passages toward the ship's central core, where the most important secrets were kept. The New Horizon had been one of humanity's last colony ships before the Empire conquered Earth. It carried 50,000 people in cryogenic sleep pods, along with everything needed to build a new civilization on a distant world. But the ship had never reached its destination. When the Empire rose to power, Father Gregory had used his position in the colonial authority to redirect the ship to this hidden location. Marcus brought Lisa to the ship's central computer core. Ancient but still functional, the system contained the complete archives of human knowledge from before the Imperial conquest, scientific discoveries, philosophical works, historical records, and theoretical research that the Empire had banned or destroyed. Most importantly, it contained the work of Dr. Helen Cross, the physicist whose theories had made the Empire fear human consciousness itself. Dr. Cross had been Father Gregory's teacher before she died in the early days of Imperial rule. She had discovered that consciousness was not just a product of brain activity, but a fundamental force that could influence reality at the quantum level. Her research showed that human minds working together could actually reshape the physical laws of the universe in small but measurable ways. The Empire had classified this research as dangerous nonsense and ordered all copies destroyed. But Father Gregory had saved Cross's complete files along with experimental data that proved her theories were correct. The Empire feared this knowledge because it suggested that their technological superiority might not be permanent. If humans could learn to use consciousness as a tool, they might become more powerful than their alien conquerors. Marcus spent days studying the archived research while Lisa's team explored the rest of the colony ship. The theoretical frameworks were incredibly complex, but Marcus's years of meditation training helped him understand the deeper principles. He began to see how the way of unbreaking could be more than just a philosophy. It could become a weapon. That attacked the very foundations of Imperial power. While Marcus studied, Lisa made contact with resistance cells across the galaxy using the ship's hidden communication system. She reported their discovery and began coordinating plans for the next phase of their mission. The resistance had grown enormously in the 3 years since Marcus's capture. Millions of beings now practiced some form of the unbreaking philosophy. They were ready for something more than passive resistance. Admiral Zethka's pursuit. Fleet had been searching the nebula for a week when his scouts finally detected the New Horizons energy signature. The Admiral realized immediately what the rebels had found. Imperial intelligence had always suspected that the human colonial authority had hidden something important during the conquest. This discovery explained why the escaped monk had been so valuable to the resistance. Zethka understood that he faced a decision that would determine the future of the Empire. He could order his fleet to attack the colony ship and destroy whatever secrets it contained. But this would also mean killing 50,000 sleeping humans and losing the chance to learn what the rebels had discovered. Alternatively, he could report the discovery to higher authorities and wait for orders from the Imperial capital. The Admiral chose a third option. He decided to capture the colony ship intact and interrogate the rebels to learn exactly what they had found. If the secrets were truly dangerous, he would destroy them himself. If they could be useful to the Empire, he would claim credit for the discovery. Zethka ordered his ships to surround the New Horizon and demanded the surrender of all personnel aboard. Marcus sensed the approaching Imperial fleet long before Lisa's sensors detected them. His consciousness training allowed him to feel the hostile intentions of the alien minds aboard those ships. He knew they had very little time before the Empire's overwhelming military power trapped them in this hidden refuge. Marcus also knew something the Admiral did not. The 50,000 humans sleeping in the colony ship's cryogenic pods were not just refugees from Earth's conquest. They were volunteers who had agreed to participate in Dr. Cross's most ambitious experiment. Their minds had been specially prepared. Before being placed in suspended animation, they were designed to form a collective consciousness network that could be activated when humanity needed it most. Marcus realized that this was the moment Father Gregory had been preparing for all those years. The Empire's greatest strength was about to become their greatest weakness. Their rigid hierarchy and absolute control made them predictable. They would demand surrender and expect compliance. They had no understanding of what unified human consciousness could achieve. Lisa's team prepared for battle, even though they knew their single transport ship could never defeat an Imperial fleet. Marcus asked them to trust him and follow his instructions exactly. He explained that they were about to attempt something that had never been tried before. They were going to use human consciousness itself as a weapon against the Empire's most advanced technology. The first step was awakening the sleeping colonists. The cryogenic systems had been designed to revive small groups of people gradually over several months. Marcus needed all 50,000 awakened simultaneously, which the automated systems said was impossible. But Dr. Cross had built hidden overrides into the equipment that could only be activated by someone with the proper consciousness training. Marcus placed his hands on the central control panel and extended his awareness into the ship's computer networks. He found the hidden pathways that Dr. Cross had created and began the massive awakening process. Throughout the New Horizon, cryogenic pods began opening as their occupants returned to consciousness after 70 years of sleep. The newly awakened colonists were confused and disoriented at first. They remembered boarding the ship to escape Imperial conquest, but expected to wake up on a new world, not in the middle of a nebula surrounded by enemy warships. Marcus used the ship's communication system to explain what had happened and what he needed them to do. Admiral Zethka watched with growing unease as energy readings from the colony ship began to spike far beyond normal levels. His science officers reported massive neural activity that seemed to be synchronized across the entire vessel. The patterns were unlike anything in Imperial databases. Whatever the humans were doing, it was completely outside the Empire's understanding. Of natural law, Marcus felt the collective consciousness of 50,000 humans focusing on a single purpose. The mental network that Dr. Cross had theorized was becoming reality. Individual minds linked together into something far greater than the sum of its parts. The sleeping potential of human consciousness was finally awakening. The Admiral decided he could not risk allowing this unknown experiment to continue. He ordered his ships to open fire on the new horizon. Energy beams and missile volleys streaked through space toward the defenseless colony vessel. At that range, nothing could stop the complete destruction of the ship and everyone aboard, but the weapons never reached their target. The focused will of 50,000 unified human minds reached out and touched the quantum foundations of reality itself. Energy beams bent away from the ship as if deflected by invisible shields. Missiles simply ceased to exist as their molecular bonds dissolved. The laws of physics themselves seemed to bend around the colony ship. Admiral Zethka stared, in shock at the impossible sight. His most powerful weapons had been rendered useless by something that should not exist, according to everything the Empire understood about the universe. For the first time in his military career, the Admiral felt genuine fear. Marcus smiled as he felt the enormous power flowing through the consciousness network. This was what Father Gregory had died protecting. This was what the Empire had tried so hard to prevent. Humanity was finally ready to reclaim its destiny among the stars. The news of Admiral Zethka's defeat spread through the Imperial fleet like wildfire. A single human colony ship had somehow neutralized the Empire's most advanced weapons using an unknown form of technology. The Admiral's surviving ships retreated to a safe distance while he sent urgent reports to the Imperial capital. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire faced something it could not understand or control. Emperor Vorthik received the reports while holding court in his crystal palace on Nexus throne. The Emperor was not a physical being in any normal sense. Long ago, he had transferred his consciousness into pure energy, allowing him to rule for millennia without aging or dying. His voice resonated through the throne room like distant thunder. As he questioned his military commanders about this impossible defeat, the Empire's greatest scientists and military strategists gathered to analyze Admiral Zethka's data. They studied the sensor recordings of weapons simply ceasing to exist. They examined the energy patterns that defied all known laws of physics. Some suggested the humans had discovered alien technology from an extinct civilization. Others proposed that the readings were false, created by some sophisticated jamming system. None of them considered the truth. The Empire's rigid scientific thinking could not accept that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force of nature. They had built their civilization on the belief that reality was fixed and controllable through superior technology. The idea that thought and will could reshape the universe was too alien for them to comprehend. While the Empire struggled to understand what had happened, Marcus prepared for the next phase of his plan. The demonstration in the Void Nebula had proven that Dr. Cross's theories were correct. Human consciousness could influence reality when properly focused and unified. But the 50,000 colonists were not enough to challenge the Empire's control over the entire galaxy. Marcus needed something far more ambitious. The resistance networks that had spread them the way of unbreaking across hundreds of worlds were the key. Millions of beings had learned the basic meditation techniques and mental disciplines. They had been practicing for years without fully understanding the true purpose of their training. Now Marcus was ready to activate the greatest consciousness network in galactic history. Captain Lisa Morgan used the New Horizons hidden communication systems to contact resistance cells throughout Imperial space. She sent out coded messages that told local leaders to prepare their followers for something unprecedented. The time had come to move beyond passive resistance and challenge the Empire directly. On the industrial world of Forge Station, Betty Ford gathered her fellow factory workers in secret meetings. She taught them advanced meditation techniques that Marcus had transmitted through the consciousness network. The workers learned to link their minds together while maintaining their normal daily routines. Imperial supervisors noticed that productivity was improving but had no idea why. On New Dakota, Paul Carter organized farmers across 3 continents. They practiced group meditation in their fields, using the mental connection to coordinate their efforts with perfect efficiency. Crop yields increased dramatically as the farmers learned to sense exactly what their plants needed. The Imperial Agricultural Ministry was baffled by the sudden improvement in food production. Similar preparations took place on dozens of worlds. The followers of the Way of Unbreaking had become a hidden army of minds trained to work in perfect unity. They appeared to be ordinary citizens going about their normal lives. But beneath the surface, they were part of something the Empire could never detect or prevent. Marcus knew that his final confrontation with the Empire would require a tremendous sacrifice. The ultimate meditation technique that Father Gregory had taught him would allow him to become a focal point for the consciousness of every human in the galaxy. But the process would consume his life force completely. He would die to give his species the power to break free from Imperial domination forever. Before beginning his final mission, Marcus spoke privately with each of the awakened colonists aboard the New Horizon. He explained what he planned to do, and asked them to carry on the teachings after he was gone. These 50,000 people would become the seeds of a new human civilization, built on the principles of consciousness rather than technology. The imperial capital of Nexus Throne was the most heavily defended world in the galaxy. Massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The planet's surface was covered with gleaming towers that housed the Empire's government and military command centers. At the center of it all stood the Emperor's Crystal Palace, a structure that seemed to be made of solidified light itself. Marcus did not try to fight his way to the capital. Instead, he used the consciousness network to project his awareness across space instantaneously. While his physical body remained aboard the New Horizon, his mind traveled to Nexus Throne and began infiltrating the palace's security systems. The Empire's technology was designed to stop physical intruders, not attacks by pure consciousness. The Emperor sensed the intrusion, but could not locate its source. Vorthik had ruled for 3 millennia by controlling every aspect of his domain. Now something was moving through his palace that he could neither see nor stop. Alarms sounded throughout the crystal towers as security forces searched for an enemy that existed only as focused thought. Marcus materialized in the Emperor's throne room just as Vorthik was meeting with his military commanders. The human monk appeared as a shimmering figure of light that gradually solidified into physical form. The Imperial guards raised their weapons, but hesitated when their energy scanners detected no solid matter to target. Emperor Vorthik dismissed his commanders and faced the intruder alone. The ancient being's voice resonated with power, accumulated over thousands of years of absolute rule. He demanded to know how a primitive human had penetrated the most secure location in the galaxy. He offered Marcus riches beyond imagination if he would reveal the secret of his abilities. Marcus remained silent as the Emperor made increasingly desperate offers. Vorthik promised him governorship of entire sectors, access to Imperial technology that could make him immortal, even a share of power over the galaxy itself. All Marcus had to do was renounce his teachings and order humanity to submit completely to Imperial authority. The monk's answer was the same that Father Gregory had given to Inquisitor Vextar years before. A simple, quiet no. Vorthik realized that this human could not be bought or threatened. The Emperor drew upon the full power of his energy form and attacked Marcus directly. Bolts of pure force that could shatter planets struck the monk without effect. Marcus had learned to exist partially outside normal reality, making him immune to conventional attacks. As the Emperor raged and struck out futilely, Marcus began the final meditation that Father Gregory had taught him. He reached out through the consciousness network to every human who had learned the way of unbreaking. Across hundreds of worlds, millions of minds felt his call and responded. Farmers paused in their fields, factory workers stopped their machines, and resistance fighters abandoned their hiding places to join in perfect mental unity. The collective will of humanity focused through Marcus like sunlight through a lens. The monk felt the enormous power building within him as individual minds linked together into something unprecedented in galactic history. This was what the Empire had feared from the beginning. Not human weapons or technology, but the infinite potential of unified human consciousness. Emperor Vorthik felt the change beginning and understood too late what was happening. The quantum foundations that supported his technology, his palace, and even his own energy-based existence began to fluctuate. Reality itself was responding to the focused will of an entire species that refused to be conquered. Marcus looked at the Emperor one last time as the palace began to crumble around them. The monk's physical form was already starting to fade as the meditation consumed his life force. But his voice carried clearly through the chaos as he spoke the words that would reshape the galaxy forever. He told Vorthik that some things could not be conquered by force. Some things could not be broken by any power in the universe. The human spirit was one of those things, and it was finally free to show the galaxy what was possible when consciousness itself became a weapon. The Crystal Palace collapsed as the laws of physics that supported it simply ceased to function properly. Across Nexus Throne, Imperial technology began failing as the unified will of humanity reached out to touch the very foundations of reality. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years was learning that consciousness was more powerful than any weapon ever built. The collapse of the imperial capital sent shockwaves through the galaxy that went far beyond the physical destruction of buildings and technology. When Emperor Vorthik's Crystal Palace crumbled, it took with it the quantum foundations that supported the Empire's most advanced systems. Communication networks failed across hundreds of worlds. Warships fell from the sky as their engines simply stopped working. Government buildings lost power as their energy sources became inert matter. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding in those final moments as his physical body dissolved. The meditation that Father Gregory had taught him was complete. The unified will of millions of human minds had reached through him to touch the deepest levels of reality itself. The monk's individual awareness scattered like stars across the galaxy, becoming part of the greater consciousness network that would guide humanity into its new future god captain. Lisa Morgan watched from the new horizon as the readings from Nexus Throne went completely dark. The imperial capital had simply vanished from long-range sensors, leaving behind only empty space where the most powerful world in the galaxy had once existed. She knew that Marcus was gone, but she also understood that his sacrifice had achieved something impossible. The empire that had ruled for 3,000 years was finally broken. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. On some worlds, imperial governors tried to maintain control using whatever technology still functioned. Local military commanders declared themselves independent rulers of their sectors. Alien species that had been conquered centuries earlier saw their chance for revenge and began attacking former imperial strongholds. The galaxy seemed to be descending into a civil war that could last for generations. But something else was happening alongside the chaos. The consciousness network that Marcus had activated continued to function even without its focal point. Humans across the galaxy found they could communicate through mental connections that transcended space and time. The way of unbreaking had evolved into something far more powerful than a simple philosophy. It had become a tool for building civilization. Based on cooperation rather than domination, Lisa used the consciousness network to coordinate resistance cells across dozens of worlds. She found that she could share thoughts and plans instantaneously with other human leaders, regardless of distance. The scattered fragments of humanity began working together with an efficiency that amazed even themselves. They moved quickly to secure vital resources and protect civilian populations from the chaos following the Empire's collapse. The 50,000 colonists from the New Horizon became the core of the new human government. They had been specially trained for this role before entering cryogenic sleep 70 years earlier. Dr. Helen Cross had foreseen that humanity would eventually break free from imperial control and would need prepared leaders to guide the transition. These awakened colonists carried the complete archives of human knowledge and the wisdom to use it responsibly. On New Dakota, Paul Carter found himself leading a coalition of farming worlds that had declared independence from imperial rule. The farmers used their mental connections to coordinate food production and distribution across dozens of systems. They ensured that no one went hungry during the chaotic transition period. Their success inspired other agricultural regions to join the growing Confederation of Free Worlds. Betty Ford organized the industrial workers of Forge Station and similar manufacturing worlds. The factories that had once produced weapons for the Empire were converted to create tools and machines for peaceful reconstruction. The workers discovered that their enhanced consciousness abilities allowed them to design and build technology that was more advanced than anything the Empire had ever created. The alien species that had been conquered by the Empire reacted differently to its sudden collapse. Some, like the Zalarian traders who had learned the way of unbreaking, chose to join the growing Confederation of Free Worlds. They brought their own knowledge and abilities to help build a new type of galactic civilization. Based on mutual cooperation, other species were less trusting of human intentions. The Korthax, who had served as prison guards for the Empire, initially tried to maintain control over their sectors through military force. But they quickly discovered that their weapons were no longer effective against beings who had learned to use consciousness as a shield. Many Korthax colonies eventually negotiated peaceful agreements with nearby human worlds. The most dangerous threat came from remnants of the Imperial military who refused to accept that their empire was truly dead. Admiral Zethka had survived the collapse of Nexus Throne and gathered the surviving Imperial fleets at a hidden base in the Outer Rim territories. He proclaimed himself the rightful heir to the Empire and began planning a campaign to reconquer the galaxy. Zethka's forces included the most advanced warships that had survived the consciousness attack. The Admiral believed that sheer military power could still overcome whatever strange abilities the humans had developed. He launched a series of attacks against the weakest human colonies, hoping to prove that the Empire could still impose its will through superior technology. The first battle took place above the agricultural world of Green Valley. Admiral Zethka brought a fleet of 50 warships against a planet that had no military defenses. The human colonists should have been helpless against such overwhelming force. Instead, they linked their consciousness together and reached out to deflect the Imperial weapons, just as the New Horizon colonists had done in the Void Nebula. But this time the defense was even more effective. The farmers of Green Valley had been practicing the way of unbreaking for 3 years. They had learned to work together with perfect unity. When the Imperial fleet opened fire, the energy beams simply dissipated harmlessly in space. The missiles turned around and flew back toward the ships that had launched them. Within hours, Admiral Zethka's entire fleet was either destroyed or disabled. The defeat of the last Imperial fleet marked the end of organized resistance to the new order. The remaining Imperial holdouts either surrendered or fled to the unexplored regions beyond the galaxy's edge. The 3,000-year reign of the Zephyrian Empire was finally over. Lisa Morgan was elected as the first president of the Free Worlds. Alliance, a confederation of independent planets united by the principles of the Way of Unbreaking. The Alliance was unlike any government the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of ruling through force and fear, it operated through consensus and mutual cooperation. Decisions were made by councils of representatives who could share thoughts and emotions through the consciousness network. The new civilization that emerged from the Empire's ashes was built on the foundation that Marcus and Father Gregory had died to protect. Individual freedom was balanced with collective responsibility. Technology was developed to serve consciousness rather than replace it. Different species worked together as equals rather than conquerors, and conquered. Dr. Helen Cross's archives became the basis for a new understanding of reality that combined advanced science with consciousness research. Universities were established on dozens of worlds to study the interaction between mind and matter. Students learned that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than the Empire's rigid science had ever imagined. The philosophy of unbreaking spread beyond humanity to other species who wanted to learn the techniques for themselves. Meditation centers were built on worlds throughout the galaxy, where beings of all kinds could come to study the deeper nature of consciousness. The knowledge that the Empire had tried so hard to suppress became the foundation for a new golden age of discovery and growth. On the anniversary of Marcus's sacrifice, the Free Worlds Alliance observed a day of silence and remembrance. Children across hundreds of worlds learned the story of the human monk who had faced an empire and left it in ashes. They learned that consciousness could not be chained, that freedom was not granted but claimed, and that sometimes one person's refusal to bow could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The Empire was gone, but its lessons remained. The Alliance worked to ensure that no single group could ever again dominate others through superior technology or military force. The consciousness network that connected all thinking beings became a guarantee that freedom would never again be lost to tyranny. Marcus Cain was dead, but his legacy lived on in every person who refused to surrender their dignity to power. The monk who had learned the way of unbreaking had taught the galaxy that the strongest force in the universe was not the ability to control others, but the determination to remain free in one's own mind and spirit. From the ashes of the old empire, something beautiful had grown. A civilization where consciousness was respected as the highest form of existence. A galaxy where freedom was not a privilege to be granted, but a right to be claimed by every thinking being. The human monk had faced the empire and left it in ashes, but from those ashes had come something far greater than what had been destroyed. The universe would never be the same.